What happens when the world just stops seeing you? Not because, your appearance has drastically changed, but just because you've stopped playing a certain part. That's a really powerful question, and it's where we're starting our deep dive today. We're getting into some profound territory here: identity, visibility, ancestral memory, all drawn from this incredible work by Jaime Hoerricks, PhD, The Long Return, on Femmeness, Stone, and the Memory That Would Not Die. Mm. Yeah, our mission today is, well, to unpack a really radical perspective on feminists, one that goes way beyond the usual societal boxes. We're exploring what the author calls a geometry of return. Think of it like finding your way back to a more authentic self, maybe using an internal map you didn't even realize you possessed. You see, the author shares this fascinating personal story moving from being really visible, like a master mason or a competitive thrower, these powerful public roles, to a much quieter, almost, well, invisible existence. And it's that shift, that transformation, that tells us so much about how society values people. Or doesn't. It's packed with insights. Okay, so let's dig into this a bit. The author talks about a time when they were incredibly visible, applauded even.
Oh.
Picture it, 10,000 people in a stadium, cheering as they throw a heavy stone or a hammer. Or lodge rooms packed, standing room only, just to hear them speak as a master mason. There was this real spectacle of strength, a kind of commanding presence that definitely got them seen, got them respect, even if they weren't entirely comfortable in those roles. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How many of us might be performing hardness without even realizing it, just to be visible? It's almost like a trick of the light.
It is. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is how the author describes the shift away from that. It wasn't dramatic, no big announcement. It was this quiet absence. They call it a grief that doesn't announce itself with sobs. That visibility, the applause, it just faded when they softened. And this softening, it wasn't primarily biological. I mean, yes, hormones shifted, testosterone faded, estrogen flowed, but the core change was stopping performing hardness. It was about letting go of that mask, stepping out of utility and into truth. And in doing that, suddenly they became invisible in a way they hadn't been before.
Right. Which leads to this really fundamental question the author poses. What is it really that people look for when they look at a person? Is it their actual presence? Or is it just compliance? Is it about the body itself or just its usefulness? It stops you in your tracks, that question. And their conclusion is, well, quite stark. They say, once you are no longer useful to patriarchy's choreography, and that's a powerful phrase, patriarchy's choreography, meaning when you stop playing the expected roles, it doesn't matter how much space you take up, you will not be seen.
Yeah. It highlights how often value is tied to function within a system rather than inherent being.
Exactly. Now, adding another layer here is the author's background. A 33rd degree Mason. For anyone unfamiliar, that's a really high rank in Freemasonry. It implies being trusted to teach complex ideas, complex cosmologies even. So when someone with that background says they sensed something else pulsing beneath the scripts, even within those very structured patriarchal systems, you listen.
You really do.
Something older, something they felt was too dangerous to name aloud, in places that had, frankly, already sidelined the divine feminine. They were tracing the absences, letting the silence speak.
In connecting this to the bigger picture, it sheds light on the author's current exploration of figures like Inanna and Shakti. These aren't just, goddesses from old stories. Inanna from Mesopotamia, Shakti from Hinduism. The author sees them not just as myth or woman in that limited social sense, but as elemental forces, as power, movement, holy chaos, insistence. If you look at the ancient Indo-European roots, the feminine wasn't lesser, wasn't just the wife. It was the spiral, the pulse, the land and water and night, a partner, a cosmic mirror.
That completely reframes it.
It does.
So the core idea here, the big distinction the author makes, is that their journey wasn't about becoming a woman. That phrase didn't capture the truth of it. It was about remembering a sacred feminine resonance that crucially did not need permission. It wasn't derived from anything else. It did not belong to anyone but itself.
Right. For them, the realization was the divine feminine was never woman. She was motion. She was orientation. She was force. It's a fundamental shift in perspective.
And even before any formal declarations, any labels, the author describes this intuitive sense of their gender as just softness, like a hum in the chest or a loosening in the shoulders, a way of moving that didn't brace against the world. It wasn't an identity label like, I am a woman. It was this deeper feeling, I am soft.
Yeah, an embodied knowing. And that helps explain why the term trans woman, while useful perhaps as a bridge for navigating medical and social systems, ultimately felt more like a road sign than the actual landscape of their experience. The author mentions being a Gestalt language processor, meaning they understand things holistically, in patterns, echoes, loops, not necessarily linear A to B steps.
Okay, that makes sense.
So trans women could feel a bit too linear, like moving from one fixed point to another, implying something they became, which didn't quite fit that feeling of remembering something already there.
Right. And that brings us to why transfemme resonates more deeply for them. As they put it, transfemme doesn't pretend to resolve anything, it doesn't ask for finality, and importantly, it doesn't require performance. It's less a label and more a stance, a direction, maybe like a gravitational pull toward the feminine. Elemental foundational, presence, not role.
And the felt difference is key here. The author has this beautiful way of putting it. Trans women can feel like a door you walk through and then close behind you, like a completed transition. Transfemme is a window left open, a current still moving.
A window left open. I like that.
It's about becoming coherent to yourself, maybe not always legible to others through a cis lens, but coherent internally, through small things, how you sit, how you listen, how you hold emotion without hardening against it. It's ongoing.
Okay. Shifting gears slightly but staying connected, the author draws this really powerful, maybe even unsettling line, a thread of theft and desecration running from, quote, temple ruin to trans body. They argue that the divine feminine, this vast, powerful force, wasn't just forgotten, it was actively made unspeakable.
Deliberately dismantled.
Yes. Taken apart, diminished, recast into smaller manageable roles. Wife, witch, whore, a kind of historical campaign to contain something perceived as too powerful.
And that historical thread connects directly to their own experience. They were welcomed, seen, when they were useful, in a particular way, that spectacle of strength, that authoritative voice. But the moment they stopped performing that, refused the borrowed language of hardness, they became, in the eyes of the system, unproductive. Unproductive to empire.
Wow.
And they bring in that stark quote from Gretchen Felker-Martin.
Yeah.
People like you were not liberated. People like you were not remembered. People like you were allowed to die. It's about how systems discard what doesn't serve their function.
That's incredibly harsh, but it rings true in this context. Yet despite that, the author's defiance is so clear, but I don't. I haven't. And still I am here, and still I remember.
Yes.
They frame the act of simply living their softness, without apology, without shrinking, as reweaving the line, as reclaiming what they tried to steal. It's not nostalgia. It's presented as an act of power, being the interruption, being the one who remembers. It's resistance through authentic existence.
Absolutely. A quiet but profound resistance.
Let's bring in another really evocative image the author uses. Stone circles. They describe standing inside one, and the feeling wasn't about geometry as measurement or control like we often think of it now. It was about memory. The land's memory, the stone's relationship to the moon, the solstice, the tides, an attunement. These ancient places weren't built just to impress, but to relate. They embody a different way of knowing, something felt, not just calculated. It really makes you pause, consider what older knowledge systems we've lost touch with.
It does, and this is where the author draws that fascinating connection between Femmeness and these stones. Quote, not fixed, but faithful. Not assigned, but aligned. So for them, Femmeness isn't about costume, performance, surface. It's deeper. It's an alignment, an orientation, the geometry of how I move through the world. It's about shaping silence, participating rather than dominating.
Like the stones themselves.
Exactly. It's attunement, persistence.
Yeah.
They say like water shaping the ground, like stone remembering the sky. It's this ongoing dynamic relationship, not a static box to fit into.
Which leads us to this idea of relational geometry. Can you unpack that a bit more?
Well, it's presented as a way of holding things ourselves, each other. The world that doesn't try to reduce or contain. It's about listening, reflecting, circling back, waiting. And that waiting isn't passive or weak.
Right. They stress that. Waiting is knowledge.
Yes. Knowing the tide returns, the moon reaches its place. That what is aligned does not need to be explained. It's kind of deep trust in natural cycles and inherent connections.
That idea, stillness and patience as a form of knowing, not weakness, really challenges a lot of modern assumptions about power and progress, doesn't it?
Completely. It reframes power away from dominance and towards resonance, maybe, harmony with larger rhythms. It's power that unfolds rather than conquers.
So thinking about the author's journey overall, it really bucks the trend of the conventional hero's journey. There's no big dramatic reveal, no striving for assimilation into cis norms. Instead, they describe it almost like walking backward through time, undoing the forgetting, unlearning the roles, returning to the place where my shape already made sense. like finding a thread that was dropped lifetimes ago, an archaeology of the self.
And that concept of masking comes up not just hiding, but as a survival tool to stay within a system. So when the author dropped the mask, the withdrawal that followed wasn't a collapse. It was consciously creating sanctuary.
A deliberate pulling inward.
Exactly, pulling inward to reform, to hold space for parts of the self that had been denied. It was about stopping the search for external validation and rebuilding from within.
And even their choice of celibacy gets reframed. It's not presented as bitterness or lack. It's about establishing boundaries, holding true to this rediscovered self, finding their own edges again, refusing to slip back into performance.
Right.
So in this light, coming out wasn't arriving at a new destination, but more of a homecoming, laying down burdens that never really fit, a softening back into oneself. It's quite a beautiful image.
It is, and the direction is so key, not toward cisness or trying to approximate it, but backward through empire's forgetting. There's a worldview, a cosmology where softness was not a failure but a force.
Yes.
Where femness was not decoration but orientation, not ornament but origin, a return to something foundational.
Which culminates in this really powerful self-description, the one who slipped through the cracks in the myth and found the thread again. The one who walked not forward but inward, not to conquer but to reclaim. Just paints such a vivid picture of this whole journey.
It really does.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways for you, for the listener? We've touched on how softening can actually be a profound strength, how identity might be about remembering rather than just becoming, and how pushing back against those narrow patriarchal definitions of usefulness and visibility is in itself a deep act of resistance. And the author leaves us with this potent invitation, really. They suggest that if we truly want to divorce ourselves from patriarchy, maybe more of us need to walk a path, not toward legitimacy, not toward the illusion of acceptance, but toward liberation, toward the memorial that lives in the rhythm of stones, in the spirals of ancient language, in the untamed softness of bodies that refuse to harden.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? This idea of gender not as some kind of contract you agree to, but gender is a deep, profound remembering.
Yeah, not a role you have to play.
But an act of resistance.
Not performance for others.
But just presence. Inherent presence. The idea being that this sacred orientation, this deeper knowing, was never really theirs, society's, patriarchies, to gatekeep in the first place.
Right. And still, it is ours to return to. A lot to think about there.